And we're live. Welcome to the 10th edition of Community Currencies Now, where we try to connect the people in the blockchain space making major progress with people on the ground doing normal community currency work around the space. Today, we're joined with a really cool crew. We have Bar from Offset. Bar, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, nice meeting you, Griff. I'm Bar from Israel. I'm 32 years old. My background is mostly with mathematics and cryptographic research. My day job is researching cryptographic protocols for security vulnerabilities and stuff like that. And I'm working on Offset.
Nice. Yeah, the Offset has a really cool story. I'm excited to hear it. And then, of course, we're also joined with Niran. Niran from Panvala. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hey, everybody. My name is Niran Babalola. I'm the founder of Panvala. I've been working in the blockchain space for about 5 years now. Started Panvala back in 2018 and launched it on mainnet a little over a year ago. What we do is we subsidize communities. So looking forward to talking more about that.
And of course, as always, I'm joined with Julio. Julio from Circles, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hello, everybody. My name is Julio, coming to you live from Berlin at the Cafe Grunda in Common, where we work on Circles, a basic income on the blockchain.
Yeah. So in general, my role is to facilitate a good discussion, and Julio is working with you guys watching. So if you have any questions, just put it in the YouTube chat and at any time, and Julio is going to make sure that you get to be part of the show. So, but let's start with Bar. Bar, tell us about Offset. I'm especially excited about the interesting story of how it started, and I'm sure anything else you want to present.
Okay, so how Offset got started? Actually, what I was trying to do initially was something like share bandwidth sharing. Fair bandwidth sharing, yeah. So what it means is that many computers are connected together, and you can somehow use somebody else's internet connection or bandwidth in some way, and do it in a fair way. And to do it in a fair way, you probably need to pay in some way. So it really required that everything is going to be really quick and very efficient. I couldn't use anything that is kind of heavy, like a blockchain where transactions are sometimes a bit slower. So I worked on this for a while, set up all the cryptographic primitives and everything that required to make it a secure system. And one day when I showed it to a fellow researcher at my workplace, he pointed out that it doesn't work very well and people can actually cheat and steal bandwidth from other people. So I was really frustrated with it because I worked on it for a really long time. I thought about it for a long time. But what he pointed out is that actually the payment layer that I had there is actually very useful and people might want to use it. So this is what Offset is right now, just the payment layer from all of that system. I can introduce Offset and generally what it does. I have a short slide that I can show you.
Yes, for sure. Yeah, load it up. I think that's just hilarious, though. You know, you're like trying to create a bandwidth sharing network, and then it's like, oh, you can cheat it. Well, the payment thing is really cool. Let's keep going.
Okay, let me set up this screen sharing. Okay, so do you guys can see it?
Yeah, it looks great.
Great. So let's start. So this is Offset. This is the logo, and we call it a credit card powered by trust between people. Actually, it's not a real credit card. Like it's not connected to traditional money systems. But we chose credit card because it's something that you can relate, something that you can pay with, and it's actually powered by trust between people. So let's try to demonstrate how it works. Start with a short story. So we have here Bob and Charlie. So Bob has a bakery and Charlie makes chocolate. And Life is good, but you can't live only on bread and only on chocolate. So at some point, maybe Bob is going to want to eat some chocolate, or Charlie is going to want to eat bread, because otherwise life is kind of boring. So what can they do? They can actually use the excess of what they make. Like maybe Bob makes more bread and Charlie can actually exchange it for some of her chocolate. So both of them can enjoy both things. If we think about like only those two people as the whole economy. So it sounds nice, but there is still some kind of a problem here. What happens if, for example, Bob wants to trade a loaf of bread, for example, but Charlie is not into making chocolate at the moment. Like maybe it's not the right time and she wants to trade it later. So they can't really exchange it like that, like one for one. And another possible problem is that maybe Bob's bread is a bit pricier than Charlie's chocolate bars. So maybe it's kind of difficult to exchange it. So the really traditional way to solve this is with a bank. This is what we usually do right now. This is a very simplistic picture. Like it misses lots of things from how things really work in the world, but it kind of shows the main idea that in order to buy, Charlie can do something like that. She can first get a loan, then use the money to buy bread, then she can eat the bread and make some chocolate, then sell it to Bob, and finally, Charlie is going to return the money back to the bank, but with interest, because the bank wants interest. So in this picture, what I'm trying to convey in a very simplistic way, that the bank is some kind of a parasite in the system, because maybe Charlie and Bob could exchange things without having to depend on the bank. And it seems like Charlie has to work harder and maybe put up her prices because she has to return more money to the bank. So Offset tries to solve this with an idea called mutual credit, which I think is not very new to this channel. I have seen other people talk about it here before. So the main idea is that Bob and Charlie are going to maintain a balance together. Note that this is not something that requires an external entity to manage, because they can just, for example, write it on a piece of paper and just maintain the balance. And whenever Charlie wants to sell chocolate to Bob, they can do something like this. They can just update the balance between themselves. And Charlie later can use the excess in her balance maybe to buy bread at another time. It's some kind of a promise for the future that Bob is going to accept later. Of course, one thing that we need to add is credit limits, and we do this to mitigate the risk. So here in the picture, Charlie is going to put a bracket of 150 credits, for example. It could be any unit of credit. And Bob says that he has a bracket of 200, just for example. This means that Charlie will never get richer than 150 credits in the system, and Bob will never get richer than 200 credits. This is actually the maximum amount of credits that Charlie trusts Bob in this relationship, in this mutual relationship. And what the really interesting thing about Offset is that it allows transitive transactions. So for example, if the economy is a little bit bigger and we have someone else called Dan, Bob is able to send money to Dan and actually exchange services. For example, maybe Bob wants to buy something from them, like a repair service. He can send the money all the way to Dan through his relationship with Charlie. So what is interesting here is that although Bob and Dan do not have a direct mutual credit relationship, they can still trade. How is this done? I'm going to press the button and you can see that from 0, we move to 100. So now we can see that Charlie, on one hand, is at plus 100 with Bob and at minus 100 against Dan. And we can see that Bob is at minus 100 and Dan is at plus 100. So we actually had a transaction here. So basically, the main features of Offset is that it's kind of a credit system based on social trust. And these are really the main features that I care about in Offset. It provides interest-free credit. It should have low fees. It provides fast atomic payments, auditable accounting. It really respects your privacy, and probably the most important, it is decentralized. This is something that is really top priority for the Offset design. Offset has a mobile app. This is what it looks like. It's still very new. There's still much more to do. And actually, Offset itself is an open protocol. So anyone can really create an app to use the protocol. Currently, we are creating a new version of the protocol. So I would not advise to use this app to actually do business with people. In addition, we don't have a real security audit at this point yet. So I still consider it some kind of a toy just to demonstrate what is possible. So this is about what is Offset.
That's really cool. One quick question. So you mentioned that this is decentralized, but it's not using a blockchain, right? Can you just really quickly say how the relay system works?
Yes. So maybe I will share the screen again. We have here a picture. Can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Great. So this is a simple picture of the network structure. What can we see here? The node here, painted as a credit card, is actually what you are going to have on your phone. The node and also the application itself. All of this part is on your phone. And this is, for example, a phone of somebody else. And this is what the network looks like. We have here a few relays. Relays are kind of servers that all that they do is just move network packets between different nodes. And we have index servers. And all of the transactions, they really happen between two nodes. We don't need any blockchain or any external entity that keeps the money. So maybe the question you ask is actually where's the money stored? The money is stored inside the node. So for example, if this is Bob and this is Charlie, both of them are going to remember in each of those nodes the actual balance. And the balance is going to be the same in this node and in this node. And there is some kind of protocol that synchronizes the balance between them to make sure that the balance doesn't change, that they have a mutual view of the world. So basically, this is how the network works. I hope that I managed to answer the question. Maybe.
Yeah. No, that's exactly it. That was exactly what I wanted to see. Thank you so much, man. Well, and now we also are lucky to be joined by Niran. And Niran, you're doing so much in the public goods cryptocurrency space. Do you want to present Panvala? And hopefully you'll get to chat about the latest Gitcoin grant matching round.
Yeah, that'd be great. So hi, everybody. Again, I'm Niran, and I'm the founder of Panvala. I'll go ahead and share my screen and tell you a little bit about what Panvala is all about. So the problem that we're trying to solve in general is that communities really thrive when they have subsidies, but subsidies are hard to get. So if you've experienced community life on a university campus, like there's a thriving community life there, but it's subsidized by university endowments and student activity fees and other funding. It's not all voluntary payments from people. It's subsidies that are funding that community life. A lot of local nonprofit activities subsidized by local companies that have donation matching programs that attract employees that are really tied into their local community. And what we've seen in the Ethereum community is that once the Ethereum Foundation started matching donations, started providing subsidies, it created this vibrant culture where people start to make individual donations to support the projects that they care about. And every quarter we talk about what deserves funding, what we need to focus on, and who's doing good work. Communities really thrive on subsidies, but subsidies are hard to get. And that's the problem that we're trying to solve. The way we solve it is by subsidizing communities the same way that Bitcoin subsidizes its security. In Bitcoin, the operations of the network are not paid by users. The transaction fees do not fund the network. It's also not funded by some sort of wealthy benefactor or some sort of big foundation. Instead, what Bitcoin holders do, the system that they've opted into, is that they're going to inflate the supply of Bitcoins over time and issue block rewards to the miners that are operating the network. And that's how they fund it. They created their own subsidies to operate the Bitcoin network without depending on anybody. So we're trying to generalize that model. It's really a new model for philanthropy. And it doesn't have to be tied to a blockchain. It doesn't have to be tied to Bitcoin. You can create a whole new token and operate it on the same principles and provide subsidies that way. So that's what Panvala does. When you hold Pan, you're opting into a system where you know you're going to be diluted up to that maximum supply of 100 million, and all of those new tokens that we're issuing are going to subsidize the communities in the Panvala League. Recently the matching over the past quarters was about 5x. In general, the trajectory is down over time, right? Because we're approaching the maximum supply of 100 million. The inflation subsidies don't last forever. We expect to have high inflation subsidies for about a decade or two, like Bitcoin. But since Panvala is all about subsidies, we don't want to run out of subsidies. Even if it's 2 decades from now, we don't want to run out. So over time, the idea is that we maintain subsidies by seeking out corporate sponsorships. We start out with inflation subsidies that are matching our donations. And then as we build up the Panvala League, as we grow the community, that gives us better access to corporate subsidies that can keep the system going forever. So that's the general model. What we've been doing this quarter is we now have the Panvala League grown to 11 communities. It was 5 communities last quarter, 11 communities this quarter, and we've been matching the donations that they raise on Gitcoin grants. So 6 months ago, back in March, we distributed about 33,000 of total funding. Last quarter was about 55,000, and currently at the current pace, it's about 140,000 that we're distributing between the 11 communities and the Panvala League. It continues to grow as we share it with more communities, and that's exactly what we want to see. So this is the kind of the state of the scoreboard in the Panvala League as of yesterday. We match donations using quadratic funding. So you can see that the communities that have more donors tend to have a bigger share of the quadratic funding, because that's the way quadratic funding works. It rewards you not just from having a large amount of funds, but by having a large amount of donors as well. So the communities with more donors have a higher multiplier, but you also have to stake tokens to earn donation matching capacity from Panvala. The general ownership model that Panvala operates on is very similar to a cooperative, where in a cooperative, when you own it, you don't just get passive returns. What you get is patronage returns. You're getting the surplus of the system distributed back to you in proportion to your patronage. And that's what we try to approximate here. We want each community to own the share of Panvala that they use, and we reward the communities that do that. And if you don't own as much as you're using, you still can use Panvala, but that means you've exceeded your capacity, and that's why some of the communities have a lower multiplier. We want every community to own its share, and you can still use it, you can still get started, even when you don't own your share, but the rules of the system reward you as you approach matching your capacity with how you use the system. So that's Panvala. We're matching donations for 11 communities in the Panvala League this quarter, and the goal is to grow to thousands of communities, because the more communities we share this with, the stronger the sustainable treasury gets, And we believe that this is a new model of philanthropy that pretty much everybody's going to want to use, and we want to share it with as many people as want to work with us.
I keep forgetting I mute myself. Awesome presentation. Thank you, Pam, so much, Neuron. I'm very curious to hear more about how exactly you manage this process from a governance layer. Because I mean, obviously this is a loaded question. I already know how you guys do it, but I think it's really cool the amount of soft governance that you include over blockchain governance. Can you discuss that decision a little bit?
Absolutely. So the whole governance philosophy behind Panvala is that it's really about stakeholder governance, but you can't really do stakeholder governance on a blockchain. So we want the minimum on-chain governance possible and to really shift things off-chain. So our on-chain governance process is really just saying, hey, there's going to be one budget each quarter. Anybody can make a proposal as long as they stake tokens on it. And if there's a dispute, if there's multiple budgets submitted for a quarter, that's what triggers a vote. So it's really just a system that's trying to say, like, let's try to reach an agreement each quarter over how we're going to use the budget. And if you don't, we're going to vote on it. And only one of those proposals is going to go through. Whoever stakes on the losing proposals loses their tokens as basically donations back into the system. So that's the on-chain system. Try to avoid disputes as much as possible. If there are disputes, we vote on it. The off-chain system is really stakeholder governance, and it's a process that I lead. Basically, I'm the chair of the Panvala Caucus, a group of individual token holders. So anybody, we want as many individuals as possible that can cooperate well together to join the Panvala Caucus. That's kind of how we get input and try to reach consensus on the recommendations each quarter. And then the other group that we have is the Panvala League, that group of 11 communities that we're trying to go to thousands of communities. And that group itself is a stakeholder group that we try to operate as kind of a league, where they're admitting new members and they're deciding who gets admitted. They're deciding what rules they want to enforce on each other. It's really a league style governance where we're trying to organize these communities to really govern themselves with the token holders as the backstop. Again, everything in Panvala is really up to the token holders, but with these stakeholder groups that we organize, we try to kind of have a process that doesn't require a majority vote on everything. That's the majority votes are how we handle disputes. Majority votes are not the governance philosophy of Panvala.
Nice. Well, if anyone has any questions for Bar or Neuron in the chat, please put them in. Julio, is there anything in there yet?
Yes, we have a question from Daniel Knobelstorff. I hope I said that correctly. He's asking if this is built, I mean, Panvala, is this built for all kinds of communities or just communities with a blockchain focus?
So it's really built for all kinds of communities. The effectiveness of the sustainable treasury, we believe, is proportional to the flow of funds into the system. So it doesn't have to be just blockchain communities. That's who we're starting with. But anybody who wants to use it, we want to share it with you. Again, we think it gets stronger the more communities that use it. So there's no reason for us to really exclude any type of community as long as donations are flowing in and as long as everything's cool with the Panvala League. Like if you're totally off the rails and the Panvala League doesn't want you to be a part of it, then you're not going to be a part of it. But as long as you're like a community that's trying to do something cool on your own, you're not trying to do crazy stuff to other people, then pretty much everybody, we want to be a part of this thing.
So like I have a friend in Costa Rica who's running a sort of impromptu charity that's giving computers to kids. And I was mentioning the Panvala, like could he join the Panvala League, or would you look for it to be more of a community, like a larger community than one single nonprofit?
So larger communities are better. In the early phases, we're really experimenting. So it's a lot easier to join the Panvala League now than it will be like in a year or two. So we're open to all kinds of experiments. We just talk it through with the league and see what people are comfortable with. We're also trying to experiment in coming quarters with an alternate model of getting funds from Panvala that doesn't require being admitted to the league. So basically, if you're admitted to the league, you have direct access to the sustainable treasury. If you aren't in the league, then maybe there's a grant process that you can go through to just get smaller one-time sort of grants, but still benefit from Panvala. So we're trying to evolve the system over time to kind of just really be a treasury that all kinds of communities can access by a variety of routes. And that's kind of the model over time.
You know, it's interesting because you guys both have different approaches on how to empower communities with currencies. I think Julio would call Panvala, correct me if I'm wrong, like a more of a commodity currency, and whereas Bar's currency is mutual credit. It's like you know, another way for people to generate their currency. I'm very curious about the different dynamics between the two and maybe the different problems that they're trying to solve. Do you guys have any thoughts on that? Just to open the discussion between you two.
Let me try.
Yeah.
One thing I know from at least my experience about things like mutual credit is that it's not very good to store value using these kind of currencies. So, for example, if you have a system like what I showed earlier, and you want to hold more and more currency, at some point you will get stuck. Like you will not be able to collect any more money. So it's more like a money in the sense of you know, people say that money has a few certain jobs that it can do. So mutual credit money is mostly good for doing transactions, mostly for moving around. If you want to store it in one place, then it's not very good. So this is one perspective, I think.
Yeah, so I think these approaches are very complementary, and mutual credit systems, really the good that's being produced is the credit. Like if you need credit for your own private needs, you come together with your community to produce that credit together. It makes your community more resilient, especially in strange economic times like the ones that we're living through. Being anti-fragile in that sort of way is super valuable. For Panvala, it's really about producing shareable things within your community. So you don't use Panvala to buy, in the example that was being used in the presentation, you don't use it to buy bread. You don't use it to buy things for yourself. Use it to buy shareable things for your community. Fund events, fund culture, fund arts, fund charity. Whatever you're doing together with your community, that's what it's for. And mutual credit's a good approach for funding what you need personally, but relying on your community to support that.
It's very beautiful because especially now, I think it's really important to have these different complementary currency designs working together, because mostly what the dollar tries to do is it tries to be a means of exchange. So something like a mutual credit, but not really. And also a store of value, right? So then you have this like monoculture that wants to arrange education, healthcare, investment, public infrastructure, all in one. So, you know, we have to look at history. We have to look at economic archaeology and know that in Egypt, in Mesopotamia, you had systems whereby you had different currencies for different purposes. So you separated the functions of money with different forms. And that allows people to think more long term when you have a mutual credit system, say with a demi-rash embedded with it. And then you have another currency that's more for saving, for investment, and so on and so forth, right?
Absolutely. Like a lot of the metaphors that are used for these community currencies are really currencies. It's in the name. And I think that's a very valuable metaphor for most of them. One metaphor that I'm trying to explore is the metaphor of land. Like if so much of our economic and social activity is oriented around this private property system that we all live in, maybe there's something about that system that could be done on a community basis as well. And to me, that's what some of these currencies look like. If you have something that has a fixed supply, something that that isn't necessarily a store of value, but something that you're like, hey, if more and more people can cooperate on top of this piece of land, maybe there's more utility in owning this piece of land. A lot of these fixed supply currencies have that same dynamic. So I think there's a lot of different property type things that we want to put in the hands of communities so they can coordinate that value on their own. And again, produce a more anti-fragile sort of system. If we're in an era where things seem to be degrading and decaying in unpredictable ways, then maybe we want the tools in every community's hands to be able to build things from the ground up. Imagine you had no social infrastructure, you had no property system, you had no, the things that we all benefit from. Imagine that was all gone and you had to just build it up from scratch. If we had the tools to be able to do that, we never want to be in that situation where we have to, but that kind of thinking allows us to avoid that fragility in the first place. If those tools are in every community's hands, we're not going to be in that situation, because when things start to get shaky, we're already going to be in the right place to put things back together.
Totally. And that's exactly the purpose of the Community Currency Alliance, is to bring together all these different approaches, to showcase them to the community internally, and then really say there are alternatives out there. It's not true. It is not true that there are no alternatives. We have many alternatives, and you, Niran, and you, Bar, are examples of that. We have another question from Luke at the Future, and he is asking if there are any specific requirements to join the Panvala League. And I guess here I would also try to ask, what's the difference between, you mentioned the Panvala Caucus, correct me if I'm wrong, and the Panvala League? Just maybe like to go a bit more into detail to understand more the structure, so to speak.
Cool. So basically the Panvala Caucus is individual PAN token holders who come together to discuss what should be done each quarter. And the Panvala League is really representatives from communities who are benefiting from Panvala. That's basically the difference. If you're one person and you want to get involved with Panvala, you're trying to join the caucus. If you're a community that's trying to get involved with Panvala, you're trying to join the league. Right now, the requirements for joining the league are very not precise. We're just trying to evaluate communities, see how much activity they have, see if they're actually capable of bringing in donations and capable of bringing in donations using the Panvala token. Like if you have a community that isn't tech savvy at all, it's going to be hard to use Panvala right now. But if you have like a moderate technical ability, like we want your community on board to start growing this thing. And as we build more technical tools, as that sustainable treasury grows, it's going to be something that anybody can use. For now, it's less about the requirements to join the league. If you think your community can use this thing and benefit from it, we want to talk to you. It's not about being exclusive. Again, we want thousands of communities to be in this league one day.
Yeah, I can just say I'm a member of the caucus and a part of the league. And to be part of the caucus, you have to have 50,000 PAN and a sponsor of 25,000 PAN, if I remember right.
So that was the original requirements for the league for the first batch of last quarter. For this quarter, we kind of got rid of those requirements. Like there's a community right now that has 7,000 PAN staked, and they're still getting a multiplier of over 3x from yesterday's results. We're still experimenting. There might be requirements for how much PAN you have to have going forward, but right now it's more about how active your community is.
Cool. And PAN is being matched for other grants too, right? Like when you donate PAN to a grant that's not part of the Panvala League, it still gets some matching. Is that correct?
Absolutely. We want to make sure that everybody can experience what it's like to be matched from the Panvala Treasury. So any donation that you make on Gitcoin grants using PAN is going to be matched. It just comes from a different part of the Panvala budget. The current precedent that we've set is that 75% of the quarterly budget is allocated via the Panvala League, and 25% is allocated for Panvala-wide sort of things. So the matching for the other donations that are made with PAN is going to come from that 25%. And then the Panvala League kind of has exclusive access to that 75%.
Very cool.
I would like to bring the conversation over to you, Bar, now, talking a bit about uptake and challenges in terms of people using Offset, especially where you are. I don't know how many people are actually using it now, but I will be curious to sort of draw a comparison to what Niran was talking about.
Sure. So right now, I think not many people are using Offset. Mostly, it's probably a few of my friends that installed it. This is what I think, and I think Griff also installed it before. So one more user. Actually, at this point, I'm not trying to get more users, mostly because I know that I'm going to change the protocol, and when it happens, it is going to break everything. So people that had the previous protocol are not going to be able to communicate with the people of the new protocol. This is how life is in things that are decentralized. It's very hard to make the bridge, but this is not actually what you asked. So about getting the users, I admit that I've never actually tried it because I was mostly into the technical side of things. It's like it was kind of a personal problem for me. All of having this kind of a decentralized system, it's like a personal quest, and I really got into it, and I never got to the other parts. So I do realize that there are lots of things missing. I'm probably going to need some help on that. But I don't know, currently, maybe it's naive thinking, but I think that when I have something that I feel that is stable enough and maybe secure enough, maybe when the corona ends, the COVID-19 ends, I'm going to go on the street and start convincing people to use it. I don't know. This is my naive thought. I hope it gives some kind of hope. I don't know.
For sure, for sure. That's really great. I mean, I think, I guess part of what we're trying to do at the CCA, at the Community Currency Alliance, is say, okay, if we have developers or programmers, computer programmers, you know, creating these interesting systems, how can we connect them to communities of practice, right? So similar to what Niran is doing, right? Looking for communities that are out engaging with things. And then the question is, how do we bring all of this together in some sort of democratic way where we can say, okay, here we have Pambala, here we have Offset. How can a community use this in a way where, you know, the complexity is not so high, where people can say, okay, 1, 2, 3, I join and we can use this, right? Yeah, if you need any support on that, we're more than happy to support in any way or form. And yeah, and then another question I wanted to come back to is why, like you said that you're going to change the protocol. I want to ask, why do you want to do that? And then second of all, what is actually the difference between the infrastructure that you build and a blockchain? I know you talked about it before, but I wanted to pick your brain a bit on that.
Okay, so I did talk about it, but really shortly, I can expand a bit. So why do I want to change the protocol? So as I said before, the original protocol was used to actually let computers trade with each other. So not to people, not for people. People have different requirements. This is what I discovered after a while. For example, right now, if you want to pay using Offset, you have to perform 2 QR code scans. The first scan is some kind of sharing an invoice, and the second scan is going to be to send a commitment. So in the case of computers, this is very reasonable. Computers think, okay, I'm going to send an invoice and then a commitment, and then all is good. But whenever I showed it to real people, everyone is like, huh? Why another QR scan? So in order to let people actually pay with one QR scan, which now I understand it is very reasonable request, I have to change something in the protocol. So this is the change I'm talking about. I'm also changing some other small things that allow something that I call auditable accounting, something that I figured out that is also kind of important. Right now, if you pay with Offset, you pay and the transaction is just disappears. It just, your balance is being updated, but there is no kind of history of all the transactions that happened before. And people told me, well, where did the transaction go? And I can kind of realize maybe people want to know what happened and maybe have some kind of reasonable accounting. This is something I didn't think about before. So I had to go through the whole journey of having a working app just to get to this understanding, because before nobody could tell me that. So this is why I want to change the protocol. About the infrastructure itself, I think this is a key question. This is something. This is the main thing that I was spending time on. So the first, if I go back to the drawing, I hope that you can actually see my screen here.
Yep.
So this is the drawing. I have to admit that it looks a bit complicated, and it always makes me a little bit sad, because I know that the complications in this drawing are actually the problems that I never managed to solve. For example, the first thing is those relays. You see those satellites. Actually, all I wanted to have is just the 2 credit cards. You see the 2 blue credit cards? This was the dream. I was working on this for a few years, just thinking. I didn't write any line of code. But the first problem was that I cannot send communication from one cell phone to another directly. It's just how things work, because if you care about the technical details, usually cell phones are behind some kind of a NAT, NAT, which is some kind of a device, which means that you do not really own an IP address in the internet. So there's no way to communicate directly between 2 phones without having some kind of external help from a centralized entity. And decentralization is something that is key to the offset design. I had to find some kind of solution. So the relays are some kind of a half solution. How is it solved, for example, in blockchains? So in blockchains, you just have lots of computers that are connected to each other. Those are the miners. And they use kind of a pretty inefficient way to send messages. They just flood the network. They send a message and it propagates to the whole network. And this is one thing that makes blockchains a bit inefficient, and it's an inherent flaw. It's not something that you can optimize a little bit and get better results. Every time you send a transaction, it goes through all the miners. There is no way around it. So the relays was the first thing that I didn't manage to solve. So instead of solving it, we just have those relays here. It's still decentralized, right? You can still change to any relay you want. You are never stuck on one relay. The system automatically configures everything when you change relays so that everything stays connected. The second thing that I didn't manage to solve, which is maybe even a more difficult problem, is the indexing. So what are those strained index servers here? Their main purpose is to find a route between you and the other person you want to pay to. For example, if we have here, let's see, here is okay, sounds like a reasonable example. Let's say this is the buyer and this is the seller, and I want to send money from the buyer to the seller. Now, this becomes a real problem, because if I want to do it in a decentralized way, the buyer only sees those 2, he only sees the adjacent neighbors. He doesn't see the whole network. Also, the seller doesn't see the whole network. So how can I find a route which has enough capacity at a certain time to be able to send all the money from the buyer to the seller? This is a difficult problem. I actually thought for a while that I'm going to be able to solve it, but I did not manage to solve it. Actually, these days, I believe that maybe it's not possible to solve. I mean, in theoretical way, maybe there is like some kind of a small optimization you can do, but inherently, I'm not sure that it is really possible to solve it. But don't take my word for it. I'm not 100% sure. So those index servers here are the closest solution that I managed to think of, which is still kind of decentralized. It's even less decentralized than the relays. The relays anyone can open and anyone can replace. You can replace relays to anything you want. Note that everything in this network structure is not centralized. You can either open your own relay or your own index. You can do anything you want. I don't have any control over this. I can't see any information that goes here. Everything is encrypted. So what the index does, the index servers are kind of federated, we can say. They exchange information with each other, and every node sends information periodically about its capacities with its neighbors. So whenever, for example, I want to send money from this node to this node, I'm going to query the index server. The index server is going to give me a few possible routes, or even a multi-route, which is a few routes together. And then I'm going to use those routes very quickly to send money to the other side. And I say very quickly because the network changes all the time. If I'm going to wait too long, maybe the chance is going to close, the window is going to close, and I will not be able to pass the credits. So this is about the network structure. I hope that I answered your question.
Yeah, I wanted to just give a reference to a couple of potential groups that we've had on the call before, actually, that might be something to look at for the indexer, for instance, trust lines. I know that they have a routing protocol for that. I don't know exactly if it's would fit, but it might be inspirational or like give you something. And then your network like setup feels very similar to Holochain, honestly. And I don't know if you've heard of Holochain, but it might also be another community that you could jump into and pass ideas around, you know, to inspire more improvements or even collaborations.
Thanks. I have some familiarity with the trust lines protocol, but with Holochain, I don't know much, so I need to check it out. Thanks.
Yeah. Julio, any other questions out there?
Yes, we have an interesting question by Sanel Contreras. He's asking, which of the two projects will have a greater chance to survive to an hypothetical collapse of the capitalist system?
Well, I think both. Let me just say that. But
what do you think, Niran and Bar?
So I also think both. Like, I really don't want a collapse of the capitalist system. I think that would be really rough. But like, I do think that, especially in times like these, you want to make sure that you have the tools to handle that sort of situation. But like, both of them kind of are, if you have a community-based system that doesn't necessarily require the use of force to back it up, then it should be able, it's just voluntary interactions between people. Like those sorts of things can still collapse, so to speak, but it seems more likely to be resilient in that sort of scenario.
My take on it, if there is a monetary collapse, if there is still food, I will still be able to keep coding. This is what I think. So at least this is going to stay. On a more serious note, I think that one of the most important things to me is to have the ability of being decentralized. So actually, even if the servers die, somebody else is going to be able to pick it up. Maybe this is my take on resiliency. I'm not sure about total collapse. Like, I only know how to do things in the computer. If there is no food or no water, I'm not sure that I really have a solution. This is something beyond my control.
Yeah, I think it's going to be difficult for the capitalist system to completely collapse. It does give us some benefits around satisfying individual wants and needs in a very efficient way. Unfortunately, it just comes at a cost of public goods and externalities, and there's all these market failures, as they say. But like asymmetric information and these issues where we really, in some ways, I think a monetary collapse could be really beneficial for us as a society. It'd be difficult, but we have a lot of other options, and I just think this economic monocropping is not healthy. We just need more. We need more economies.
Yeah, what we always say at Circles is that we're trying to create a different money with different values. And so I think, like, if there is, there is already a financial crisis. I think like now with the news that Trump got the coronavirus, I think the American stocks are already going down because people are afraid of what's going to happen. And so I think in these moments, systems like yours, Bar, and systems like yours, Niran, can actually come in and say, actually, hey, there are some alternatives here that we can use. We do not need to rely only on the dollar to survive if you're in the US or the euro or whatever it is that you are, right?
Well, just on that, what's funny is the Federal Reserve System seems to be a public goods system as well, right? The Federal Reserve banks enable other banks, commercial banks, to loan money to people who want to buy houses and start small businesses. This is actually, a good thing, a public good. But that's all it does. That's the only like public good function that it provides. And if we had multiple other currencies that would enable other things, like Panvala does to encourage donations in general for public goods support. And if you could even create or mutual credit systems that allow people to just make money itself a public good that anyone can enjoy. These are really powerful tools, and we need more of them. I really just also I want to just shill Thomas Greco's amazing blog post the other day. I'll put a link in the description, where he makes a really great allegory between a river that's kind of being worked by some mysterious people that can kind of control the flow of the river, and then also the ability for people to just dig their own well and create water for themselves. And this reliance on other people and other communities, like larger communities, to give us the flow that we need is just not healthy.
Totally.
Any other questions out there?
We don't have any questions from the audience, but yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I guess like right now that there is this sort of economic collapse, like what you mentioned about the Federal Reserve. It's an interesting question, right? Because I think if you look at the structure of the government of the U.S., you have the executive branch, and then the Fed is sort of like a private public mix. It's not really quite clear. It's like sometimes, but it's independent, right? From the White House and so on. And so, to me, the question is, do we actually need a central bank anymore, or is it possible with things like Panvala and what Bar is doing with Offset and on many other systems to just create other ways in which to regulate the promises that we make to one another? Because that's what money really is. It's just a promise.
Yeah, to me, I see central banks as a really cool technology for giving nations more ability to spend on stuff. Now, usually they use that power for war, and I mean, that's not my favorite thing. But like as a technology, it's incredibly powerful. Like the reason pretty much every nation has a central bank is because like it was very awesome technology, and everyone's like, I want that technology for my country. So like there's a lot of things to be said about central banking that aren't necessarily the best, but like to the extent that a country is a democracy, which is debatable, like a democracy being powered by a central bank is still better than a democracy with no central bank at all. Now, if we could find other ways to amplify the ability for communities to spend on what they want, which is kind of the goal of Panvala, then maybe it's an alternative that achieves that same sort of advantage. Maybe it achieves that advantage better than a central bank does. I don't know that yet. But that to me is the kind of thing that really excites me. The ability to take that kind of technology, and instead of needing to be a nation to try to experiment with that technology and put it to work, if communities could do that instead, I think that would be better for everybody, including actually the powers that be. Like I don't see this as a overthrowing some sort of existing order. I'm generally that's not my personality, but like I do think that like there's like you can actually just make things better for people that in ways that pretty much everybody's on board with, except for the actually evil people. There's some of those out there, but like I think for just greedy people, I think if you make a society work better for most people, you're just going to make a wealthier society to be greedy from. Like I don't think I don't think many people are against that.
Cool. Well, I think I got to close the show right here. We got 5 minutes left. Maybe give it some closing thoughts. I just to promote Gitcoin Grants has 2 hours left. If you go on panvala.com/staking, or even just panvala.com, you can get easy links to go get some pan from Uniswap and donate like crazy to all your favorite Gitcoin grants, especially the ones that say Panvala League, because the matching is insane. I know for the Common Stack Panvala League grant, we get we're diverting the funding that we received to 15 different grants that were funded that were chosen by the Common Stack community, and that we're getting about 30x matching if you donate with Pan. So definitely try to multiply the public goods funding by go getting some Pan, getting on gitcoin.co and /grants, and supporting. There's 2 hours left. This is our moment. I'll pass it to Niran. Tell us how people can find you. Tell us, any last thoughts they have about how people can interact with the Panvala community.
Cool. So the best way to keep up with what I'm doing is to follow me on Twitter. I'm Niran on Twitter. That's Niran. The best way to keep up with Panvala is to follow Panvala on Twitter. That's Panvala HQ. In general, we want you to be part of Panvala. It's a system for you. We want you and your community to share the sustainable treasury, because I think this is a system that has the potential to benefit lots and lots of people who work together to continue to subsidize their communities. If that's something that sounds interesting to you, we want you to be involved and to write this story with us.
Bar, where can people find you, and how do people interact with you, and maybe even potentially support you with the Offset protocol?
So first, it was a great hour spending with you. You can find me on the Offset website, offsetcredit.org. There's also a mailing list. I'm not very active on Twitter, so don't search me there. And how can you support? At this point, I can mostly send you updates. If you have any interesting idea or want to contact, I also have my email on my website on offsetcredit.org. So I'm waiting to hear from you.
Cool. Julio, any last thoughts and updates from the CCA?
Yes, so this has been the 10th episode of the Community Currency Alliance. So nice to have you here, Niran and Bar. So it's been a ride, Griff. So far now, we had a call yesterday to define what are our next steps, and we're gonna try to do calls on a more like a faster rates. Instead of bi-weekly, we're gonna do internal calls with different people in some sort of rotating manner. So the people that were here in these 10 calls, if they want, they can come and talk about different topics that can sort of help the CCA to grow and then get work done in terms of, I don't know, building common infrastructure, having a narrative, having a communication channel that we can sort of broadcast to the world and so on, to show that there is alternatives out there that people can use. So our only intention is to broadcast and expand what you are doing. So that's what we're up to.
Yeah, that's right. This is the end of the season. We had 10 calls, and we're going to probably take at least this next section off. Yeah, Julio, nice work. So we probably won't be back in 2 weeks from now. We're going to take some time and get some feedback from you guys about what you liked about the calls, and we're very open to hear what you want to see from Community Currency YouTube content. So find Julio and I either on Twitter or the CCA in general at CCA_now. And and thank you guys so much. Oh, and like and subscribe if you like this content, so we can get this out to the masses. Thank you all.
Bye.
Bye.